Millionaire came home and heard his daughter begging, "Forgive me. I can't take it anymore." He kicked down the door and saw ... The little girl was forced to do heavy chores by her stepmother and constantly suffered physical and emotional abuse. The stepmother openly reveled in the cruel treatment until the millionaire father unexpectedly came home. He witnessed the entire scene, and then he did something completely unforeseen that left everyone speechless. I wish you an incredible day, and I'm so glad you clicked on our video. Enjoy the story, take care, and be happy. See you soon. The melancholy sound of a piano drifted through the white estate. Each key pressed resonated in the cold air, making the spacious living room feel even more desolate. Pale morning light filtered through thick curtains, settling on the long dining table where only 3 people sat, yet the distance between them felt like an entire ballroom. What city are you watching this video from and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. Richard Morgan adjusted his cufflinks, glancing at his Rolex immaculate cream-colored suit, a perfectly aligned silk tie. The bearing of a man accustomed to controlling everything, except perhaps his own emotions. He glanced briefly at his daughter. Emma sat in silence, her small hands folded in her lap. She had woken up early just to share breakfast with her daddy. "Eat, Emma," Richard said quietly, not lifting his head from the newspaper. "Yes, Daddy," she whispered, taking a bite of toast that tasted like nothing. Her eyes kept drifting toward her father, as if hoping for something more. Victoria descended the staircase, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor, blonde hair cascading in waves. A bright red silk dress hugging her figure, and a calculated smile painting her lips. "Leaving so early again, Richard? Big meeting today?" "Yes, at the corporate office downtown." He folded the newspaper, standing up. "I'll be back tonight." She tilted her head slightly, embracing him, a routine gesture performed for an audience. "I'll prepare dinner. And the little one will help me, won't you, Emma?" Emma barely nodded. Victoria smiled, but the hand she placed on the child's shoulder tightened slightly, just enough to make Emma flinch. Richard didn't notice. He was busy checking his phone numbers, schedules, things he could keep locked away. In the corner of the room, Marcus, Victoria's younger brother, was polishing a glass. The large man in a wrinkled shirt had a lazy look and an indiscreet gaze. "My brother-in-law's always traveling. Victoria must get so lonely," he joked, half serious. Victoria shot him a withering look. "Get back to work, Marcus. Don't say nonsense in front of the child." Richard offered a weak smile. "I'm counting on you to watch the house and support Victoria." "Everything's perfectly fine," Marcus responded, a fleeting smirk crossing his face while his eyes remained fixed on Emma. Richard set down his coffee cup and grabbed his briefcase. "I trust you'll take good care of her." He leaned down and kissed his daughter's head. Emma wanted to say something, her lips trembled, but she only managed. "Take care, Daddy." He patted her gently and headed for the door. Victoria accompanied him while Emma stood in the hallway, clutching the hem of her bright sapphire blue dress, trying to hold back tears. When the engine noise faded, the house fell into heavy silence. Victoria turned around. The smile vanished instantly. "Take that glass to the kitchen and come back to clean the floor. It's disgusting." Emma hurried to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she turned on the faucet. Marcus passed by, whistling softly, then leaned close to her ear. "Hurry up. Aunt Victoria doesn't like to wait." "I'm doing it. Do I have to spell it out for you?" He grabbed the cleaning rag and threw it on the floor. "Wash the floor, now." Emma knelt down, gripping the rag, scrubbing each tile. The cold water seeped through her hands, and her knees burned against the rough floor. Victoria leaned against the doorframe, watching. "Faster, Emma. You go to an international school and you clean slower than a turtle." "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't clean the floor. Scrub that spot again." Victoria pointed, her voice icy. "You think this is a free vacation spot?" "No." Emma bowed her head, tears mixing with the mop water. On the wall hung their wedding photo, a long crack running through it. Right across the child's face. Outside in the garden, Mrs. Martha, the elderly housekeeper who had worked there before Victoria arrived, was picking flowers. From the window, she saw Emma scrubbing the floor on her knees. The old woman's face crumpled. "Poor thing," she whispered Dot at lunchtime. Victoria called out, "Emma, bring me my milk." Emma carried the glass carefully, walking slowly across the living room. But her foot caught on the carpet. The milk spilled everywhere, and the glass shattered with a loud crash. She froze. "I'm so sorry," the child whispered. Victoria shot up, her face completely devoid of warmth. "You're sorry? You just ruined my expensive rug." Emma stepped back. Her foot landed on a piece of broken ceramic, making her cry out in pain. Victoria stepped forward, grabbing the child's shoulder hard, almost making her fall. "Do you have any idea how much this costs?" "I didn't mean to." Marcus was nearby, arms crossed, smirking smugly. "She's just a kid, sister. Give her a good scolding so she remembers." Victoria whirled on him. "Shut up." Then she looked at Emma, gripping the small wrist firmly, her voice choked with rage. "I'm sick of you." Emma struggled to break free, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'll clean it up, I promise." Victoria released her, pushing Emma with enough force that she fell to the floor. The sound echoed through the room. Mrs. Martha, still outside, heard the commotion. She dropped her flower basket and ran to the window, witnessing the scene. "Dear God, Dot. She clenched her fists, but didn't dare knock Dot inside. Victoria took a deep breath, turning away as if she'd vented her fury. "Clean up this mess. Then go to your room. No lunch for you today." Emma struggled to her feet, her hands trembling as she picked up the ceramic pieces. Blood stained her fingertips. She winced, then wiped away tears, scrubbing the floor with the rag now darkened by spilled milk. Marcus still stood there, leaning against the wall, his eyes vacant. "Kid, do what you're told." "Understood?" Emma didn't respond, just bowed her head and kept cleaning. On the wall, the clock struck 12 chimes. Each chime felt like a knife slicing through the silence. Victoria sat on the couch, sipping tea, turning on the TV, acting as if nothing had happened. Have you ever felt completely helpless? Drop a comment and let me know. I'm here to listen. Far away, the road leaving the estate was still blurred by fog. A black car slowed at the curve, then stopped completely. Richard looked in the rearview mirror, his face tense. His eyes landed on a photo of his daughter tucked in his wallet. Then he pulled out his phone, intending to call home. But then a sound came through the car's speakers, a noise he didn't recognize. The sound of something falling. A cry. He frowned, gripping the steering wheel, turning the car around and speeding back down the road. At the mansion, Victoria threw the cleaning rag on the floor and stood up while Emma remained on her knees. The front door burst open violently, and wind rushed into the hallway. Richard entered without even bothering to remove his coat, instantly hearing the fading sobs from the living room. He looked around, his eyes landed on the shattered mess and the small hands holding a wound. The space froze suddenly, broken only by the ragged breathing of a father caught between fear and fury. Richard ran toward the living room, breathing hard. The smell of spilled milk and broken ceramic mixed, filling the cold air with a strange odor. He stopped dead when he saw Emma sitting on the floor, her small hands clasped together, tears rolling down her face. Victoria stood beside her, gripping the edge of the table, her face quickly shifting from shock to feigned panic. "You came back early." She slipped and fell. "I was just about to clean the floor when Emma..." Richard interrupted, kneeling. "Daddy, what happened to your hand?" He gently turned her palm, seeing the raw, red cut. "You're hurt." Emma ducked her head, trembling, her lips moving. "I broke the glass, Daddy, I'm sorry." "It's okay. I'm not angry." He tore a piece from the cleaning rag and wrapped it around her hand. "Just be more careful next time, sweetheart." Victoria approached, leaning in, her voice low. "I told you she's so clumsy." Maybe she's sleepwalking again. I saw her wandering the hallway last night. Richard looked up. Sleepwalking? Yes, I was planning to take her to a doctor tomorrow. She's been dropping a lot of things lately. Maybe it's a psychological issue, Victoria said, arranging the broken pieces while avoiding his gaze. In the corner, Marcus leaned against the wall, a smirk on his lips. Kids, right? They break everything. Don't worry about it, Richard. Emma flinched, instinctively hiding behind her father. Richard clearly saw the fear flash in his daughter's eyes. Peculiar look that caused a sharp pain in his chest. But before he could ask, Victoria interrupted. You're going to be late for your meeting. Let me take care of the child. Really, you can rest easy. Richard hesitated for a few seconds, then stood up. All right. I'll be back soon. He turned to Mrs. Martha, the housekeeper standing outside the doorframe. Watch over her for me, please. She nodded. Yes, sir. Richard's car engine roared and drove away. Through the window, Emma watched him leave, her lips pressed tight. When the engine noise faded, Victoria turned around and locked the front door. The house was in absolute silence, broken only by the wind whistling through the cracks. Finish cleaning. Then go to your room. Victoria's voice was cold. Emma obeyed silently, head bowed. What would you do if you saw a child being treated like this? Let me know in the comments. In the kitchen, Marcus sat with his feet up, listening to a small radio. You played that well, sister. He bought it. Keep your mouth shut. If you ruin this, I won't forgive you, Victoria responded, her gaze fixed on the safe in Richard's office. Her smile was as thin as a razor. I need to figure out how to get that key tonight. As the afternoon wore on, Mrs. Martha took vantage while Victoria and Marcus were out, sneaking into Emma's room with a small piece of cake. Eat this, dear. Don't starve yourself. Emma looked at her, eyes bloodshot. Mrs. Martha, I want to see my daddy. I'll talk to him. Just hang on a little longer. She held the child's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. The sound of the door opening startled them both. What are you doing in the child's room? Victoria stood in the doorway, her eyes icy. I was just, get out. And take all your things with you. Ma'am, I've worked here for 10 years. Not anymore. Victoria's voice didn't waver. What are you waiting for? Mrs. Martha stood silent, looking at Emma one last time, then left quietly. The door closed, cutting off the child's last connection to safety. Before we continue, please take a moment to leave a comment about this story and rate it from 1 to 10. How are you feeling? If there's anything you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen. I hope you find a moment of peace and reflection as you follow this healing story and its journey of courage and justice. In the days that followed, the mansion grew even more oppressive. Emma was forbidden to go to the garden. She ate alone in her room, the meals always cold. Marcus wandered while Victoria grew increasingly restless. One night, Emma woke to the sound of an argument downstairs. She snuck out to the hallway, slightly opening the living room door. Victoria was talking, her voice sharp. You don't understand. If Richard doesn't sign the asset transfer, we get nothing. How are you going to pay your debt? Marcus waved his hand dismissively. I can't sign his papers. You're his wife, do something. Victoria threw a piece of paper on the table. I'll find a way. I just need the key to the safe. Emma covered her mouth, her heart pounding hard. She backed away, almost dropping her small doll. Marcus heard the sound and instantly turned his head. Who's there? She ran back to her room, diving into the closet, hugging her teddy bear, trembling uncontrollably. The footsteps approached and stopped just outside her door, but didn't enter. A moment later, everything was silent again. The next morning, Victoria pretended to be sick, lying on the couch. Honey, I'm so dizzy. Maybe you should postpone your business trip. Richard sat beside her, placing a hand on her forehead. You don't have a fever. I'm just tired. Maybe from worrying about Emma these past few days. Victoria looked at him, her voice low. Richard glanced around the living room, noticing his folders had been moved. Who was in my office? Victoria paused briefly. Probably Marcus. He was just cleaning. He shouldn't be touching my papers. Richard spoke slowly, his gaze fixed on the safe in the corner. A small detail struck him. The key wasn't in its place. Do you think Richard is starting to suspect something? Tell me what you think. That afternoon, as Marcus passed by, Emma was cleaning the table. Her eyes changed color instantly. Her body tensed. Richard, watching from a distance, saw the reaction. A sudden recoil, as if the child was too afraid even to breathe. Emma, he called. Come here. She walked slowly, head bowed. Richard was about to ask something, but Victoria appeared, positioning herself between them. Look, she keeps sneaking into the hallway. I'm afraid she fall. Richard remained silent, his mind racing. That night, he went out to the patio and called Daniel. Hey, I need you to discreetly check inside the house. I'm not sure, but something feels wrong. I'll be there. Stay quiet. What do you think Daniel will discover? Drop your prediction below. That evening, Daniel parked his car on the side of the road. The cold wind blew through the window. He installed a small recording device on the dashboard, looking through binoculars toward the mansion. Inside, the hallway light flickered, then went out. At the same time, Emma sat on her bed, hugging her teddy bear. Footsteps echoed outside her door, slow, heavy, stopping just outside her room. She held her breath, hearing the sound of metal turning in the lock. The door burst open. A rough hand grabbed her wrist, pulling her up. Emma screamed, but the sound was choked in her throat. The hallway light flashed, reflecting on Marcus's face, his eyes dull. His smile twisted. Outside the door, Daniel looked up. The mansion's lights flickered one last time, then went out. He leaned forward, unlocked his car, and searched his coat pocket where he kept another recording device, ready to document what was about to happen. The afternoon dissolved into a damp gray. Rain pounded the roof tiles of the mansion, wrapping the space in thick gloom. Daniel stopped his car outside the gate, putting on a long raincoat, carrying a cardboard box labeled with a quick delivery logo. The door opened. Marcus barely looked at him, then turned away without suspicion. Did you order something? Daniel asked. Marcus frowned, scribbled his name and walked off. Daniel quickly entered the hallway, looking around the living room. In just a few brief moments, he placed two small listening devices, one under the desk in Richard's office, the other in an electrical outlet near the kitchen. This done, he left as if nothing had happened. At the same time, in the back basement, Emma was kneeling in the cold, dark storage room. The space smelled strongly of dampness, the walls covered with moss, several broken wooden panels stacked up. She held a broom, sweeping the floor in silence, each dry scrape echoing in the stillness. This was where Marcus confined her every time she misbehaved. As she pulled out a piece of old cloth from a shelf, a small wooden box fell. Dust flew. Emma carefully opened the lid. Inside were some faded photos, wedding pictures of her father and another woman with soft black hair and a kind smile. Then, underneath them, were some unsent letters, the handwriting shaky. Richard, I know I won't be around much longer. Please take care of our daughter. Don't let her feel alone. Emma trembled, touching the photo with her finger. Mama. From the depths of her memory, a vague lullaby resonated, warm, soft, like an ancient breath. She hugged the box against her chest, crying silently. Upstairs, Victoria sat in the living room with Marcus. The red wine in her hand tilted slightly, leaving a dark trail along the glass. Tomorrow he'll sign the asset transfer papers, Victoria said, her voice low but urgent. That investment fund is just a facade. Once the money comes in, we split it. I'm tired of waiting. Marcus squinted. And the kid? Keep her quiet for a few more days. You know how. You sure about this? Victoria pressed her lips together. Yes. How far do you think Victoria will go? Comment your thoughts below. In his car parked a few blocks away, Daniel listened through his earpiece, writing down every phrase. Each sound was clear, even their breathing. When Victoria mentioned the asset transfer and keeping the child quiet, he knew he'd reached the core of the truth. He immediately sent the first recording to Richard, along with a brief text message. "You need to hear this right now." That night, on his flight back from New York, Richard opened his phone. The static noise at first made him frown. Then the recording played Victoria's voice, cold as steel. "Once I get my share of the assets, the child has to go. I don't need her." He froze. His chest tightened. His hand gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. Every image in his mind spun Emma's terrified eyes, the wound on her hand, and Victoria's sweet, false smile. Rage mixed with agonizing pain surged through him. He immediately called the flight attendant. "I need to cancel the connecting flight. Get me off at the nearest stop." "Sir, we do it now." Just an hour later, his rental car was speeding through heavy rain. The clock showed close to midnight. The sky was so dark the car's headlights seemed to be swallowed by the night. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Victoria's phone rang. After listening, her face went pale. "Richard's coming back." Daniel must have warned him. Marcus cursed, slamming his wine glass down. "Now what?" she gasped. "Teach the kid a lesson." "I don't want her opening her mouth." "A lesson?" "Get it into her head, the fear of God. Understood? Don't leave any marks." Marcus nodded, showing a twisted smile. "You don't have to tell me twice." "What do you think will happen when Richard arrives?" "Let me know." Emma was upstairs, hearing the heavy footsteps below. She put the box back in the cabinet, hugged her teddy bear, and ran to lock her bedroom door. The bolt was loose, it didn't quite fit right. She pushed a chair against it, her heart beating wildly. Outside, the wind howled through the hallway. The light flickered repeatedly. Rain began pounding violently against the window. Marcus was approaching, his shadow lengthening on the floor, mixing with the pale light. Emma backed into the corner of the room. "Don't come closer, please, Uncle." "Uncle says shut up." "No one can hear you." His voice was rough, his hand holding something heavy steel glinting faintly. Emma trembled, backing up, stumbling on the edge of the bed and falling. She screamed, the sound swallowed by thunder. "Shut up." Marcus stepped toward her, his hand reaching out. The door burst open with a crash of thunder. Richard slammed on the brakes outside the gate, tires spinning on wet gravel. He shot out of his seat, running directly toward the house. The door hadn't been fully closed, rain soaked his cream-colored suit. He clearly heard the small fading scream resonating from upstairs, followed by heavy footsteps. "Emma!" The stairs were slippery from water. He climbed 3 at a time, his heart about to burst. The lights flickered white flash cutting through darkness. At the end of the hallway, Victoria stood frozen, her face pale as a ghost. "Victoria! Where is she?" She stammered. "You've got it wrong." Marcus was just, he didn't listen. Richard shoved her aside, grabbing Emma's door handle. Inside, he heard the sound of things falling, and his daughter's muffled cries. The door was locked. He pounded hard, then threw all his weight into a kick. The door burst open, crashing against the wall. In the pale blue light of a lightning flash, Marcus turned around. In his hand was a metal ashtray, his face contorted with fury. Emma was huddled in the corner, her bright sapphire blue dress torn, her eyes wide with terror. Thunder roared, deafeningly. Blue light ripped through the hallway, adorned with antique paintings. Richard lunged forward, shoving Victoria aside. The bedroom door flew wide open. Cold air and the smell of mildew rushed in. Emma was huddled on the floor, her hair damp, hands covering her head. In the corner, Marcus turned around, his face pale. The metal ashtray dropped from his hand, rolling a few times before stopping, dented and stained with something that looked like blood. Richard didn't think. He grabbed Marcus by the neck, slamming him hard against the wall. "What did you just do to my daughter?" Marcus struggled. "Let me go, A punch landed directly on his face, sending him rolling to the floor. Victoria rushed forward, screaming, "Richard, stop! You're insane!" Richard didn't hear her. "Daddy!" He turned and lifted Emma. The child's small hands trembled, clutching tightly at the collar of his cream-colored coat, now soaked and torn. Her breathing was ragged, tears mixing with the rain seeping through the window. "It's okay. Daddy's here now," Richard whispered, his voice hoarse. Lightning flashed, illuminating the chaotic room, a torn pillow, ceramic fragments, and a fresh bruise on Emma's small wrist. Victoria pretended to faint, grabbing her forehead. He assaulted someone. He lost control." Richard held Emma tighter. "If you ever dare touch her again, I won't stop." Marcus staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his nose, laughing harshly. "I was just teaching her a lesson. You don't understand. Shut up." Richard roared, his voice drowning out the rain. Outside the door, Daniel came running, shouting as he burst through. Richard held a tool in his hand, his flashlight sweeping across the room. "Richard! The police are already coming." Victoria stepped back, her eyes darting around. "He broke into my house. He assaulted my brother. Call the police to arrest him." "Enough, Victoria." Daniel raised his phone. "I recorded your entire conversation with Marcus." Victoria froze momentarily, her face draining of color. "You were spying on me." Daniel approached, his voice cold. "I was watching a child being subjected to violence." Marcus growled, throwing a chair toward them before bolting out the door. Richard reacted instinctively, chasing him. He slipped on the wet floor, slamming his shoulder against a table, causing a crystal statue to shatter into pieces. "Stop right there," Daniel shouted, but Marcus headed for the back door. Police sirens wailed in the night. Blue and red lights swept across the wet walls. 3 officers rushed in, intercepting him just before the exit. Marcus screamed, but the rain swallowed every sound. Have you ever witnessed injustice and wanted to intervene? Tell me your story in the comments. Victoria stood on the staircase, her hands trembling, still trying to maintain a calm tone. "Richard, this is all a misunderstanding. I was just trying to discipline the child." An officer looked around the room, taking notes. "Mrs. Victoria Morgan, I advise you to remain silent." Richard said nothing. He carried Emma out of the room, each step feeling heavy, weighing on his own heart. Outside, the rain continued to fall violently. They walked through the hallway, past the paintings that were once his pride, now only reflecting distorted shadows. Emma pressed her head against her father's chest, her breath weak. "I'm scared, Daddy. I know." He gently pressed his lips against her hair. "We're leaving this place right now." Daniel ran after them, placing a hand on Richard's shoulder. "Brother, I'll handle the rest. You take your daughter." Richard nodded, walking out to the porch. The wind lashed his face, his shirt soaked through. He didn't look back. Behind them, police lights cast blue and red beams on the mansion wall, blurred by the rain. 2 officers restrained Marcus while Victoria was escorted to a patrol car. "This is reality," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the image of Richard carrying away his daughter. Daniel handed the audio evidence to the investigation team. "That contains sufficient proof of cruel treatment and fraud conspiracy. Be careful, they'll fight back." An officer nodded, sealing the evidence. As the police cars drove away, the engine noise faded into the rain. Emma looked through the car window, her eyes blurred by condensation. She saw the mansion blur behind the downpour, looking like an imprisoned beast, silently watching them leave. Richard firmly held his daughter's small hand, trying to transmit some warmth. But Emma said nothing, just stared outside, her eyes vacant. "I promise no one will hurt you again," he whispered. "We're going far away from here." The child nodded gently. Tears fell again. He pulled her close, embracing her tightly, as if afraid to let her go forever. Outside, the rain was so dense it obscured everything, leaving only 2 small figures in the middle of the stormy night. What would you have done in Richard's position? Drop a comment below. Down the road, Victoria sat in the patrol car, her head leaning against the seat. She turned her face, looking through the water-streaked window. Richard's car slowly disappeared into the fog. Her eyes gleamed with a different look, cold, sharp, and deep as an abyss. Her hands were cuffed, but her fingers were clenched tight, nails digging into her skin. An officer closed the car door, signaling the driver to move forward. Victoria closed her eyes, her lips pressed tight. She tilted her head and spoke softly to the empty space, as if talking to someone absent. "Did you hear that? He's taking the child away. I need your help to get everything back." The next thunder exploded in the sky. The car's headlights shone directly, the white light tearing through the rain curtain. In the darkness behind them, what was once a home was now just a cold shell, eternally echoing the muffled screams buried under the Millionaire's roof. The road leaving the city stretched under rain and dim lights. Richard gripped the steering wheel, his hands dry, his eyes fixed on the winding road ahead. Emma sat in the back seat, curled up in a small blanket, hugging her teddy bear. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but had been dry for a long time. Every time the car jolted over a bump, she flinched, as if last night's thunder still echoed in her ears. "It's okay, sweetheart," Richard whispered, his voice low. "We're almost there." No response, just small, steady, silent breaths. As the sun peeked over the horizon, fog covered the road leading to the small lakeside town of Pinewood. The lake was strangely still, the surface like a faint mirror reflecting the silvery white sky. Richard stopped the car in front of an old wooden cabin at the edge of the forest. On the porch, an elderly woman with silver hair was watering lavender bushes. Mrs. Helen, a widow who had lived there for over 30 years, smiled gently when she saw them. "Hello, looking for a place to stay?" Richard nodded. "I need a quiet place for my daughter and me. Maybe for a few weeks." The little cabin by the lake is old, but it's still sturdy. She wiped her hands on her apron, squinting toward Emma. "What a beautiful child. But she doesn't smile much, does she?" Emma nodded slightly, then hid behind her father. Richard could only respond with a tense smile. They moved into the house before noon. Inside, the aroma of pine wood and apple pie lingered. Richard unpacked the luggage, opening the window to let in light. Emma sat on the windowsill, touching the layer of dust on the frame, her gaze lost toward the lake. If you could give Emma one piece of advice right now, what would it be? Share in the comments. The first days in Pinewood passed slowly. Richard tried to create a normal rhythm for his daughter, making hot chocolate in the morning, buying vegetables at the market in the afternoon, and reading bedtime stories at night. He bought Emma a new drawing notebook, crayons, and white paper. But she just sat at the table, staring at the blank page without drawing anything. "You love to draw," he said gently. Emma bowed her head, whispering, "I'm afraid of drawing it wrong." Richard felt a knot in his throat, not knowing what to say. He placed a hand on her shoulder, then walked out to the porch, staring at the calm lake, his mind in torment. At night, he often woke up abruptly. Each time, he saw his daughter's door slightly ajar, pale nightlight shining through. Emma would be sitting by the window, hugging her teddy bear, staring outside. "Still not asleep?" She flinched, shaking her head. "There's someone standing out there. I see their shadow." Richard approached, looking out the window. "Only fog and trees." "No one's there, Emma. You're safe here." The child nodded, but her hands kept gripping the teddy bear so tight the stuffing distorted. A few days later, Daniel called from the city. "Things are getting ugly, Richard. Victoria hired a top-tier lawyer." "What's she claiming?" "That you kidnapped the child and fabricated the abuse story." Richard remained silent for a long time. "She won't give up, will she?" "And she bought 2 witnesses, the new housekeeper and the psychologist who diagnosed Emma. You need solid evidence." "Thanks, Daniel. I'll handle the rest." After hanging up, Richard sat thoughtfully on the porch, watching low clouds slide over the lake. He knew the truth alone wasn't enough. In the world of the rich and powerful, truth needed to be proven with guts and evidence. Do you believe truth always wins in court? Let me know your thoughts. Mrs. Helen passed by, carrying a basket of lavender. Something troubling you? Richard offered a faint smile. Just old business that's not finished. She nodded gently, her eyes kind. Let the wind carry away old things. Here, the wind takes all the sorrow. Just try to believe it. The next day, he invited Emma to the garden to draw flowers. He spread out an old cloth and placed colorful crayons and paper. Draw, sweetheart. Draw what makes you feel light. Emma hesitated, then drew the first lines. When she finished, Mrs. Helen looked at the drawing two figures. One large and one small, standing by the lake under pale sunlight. These two look so lonely, Mrs. Helen whispered. But they're still holding hands, Emma said softly. Richard passed by, saw the drawing, and felt his heart tighten. He didn't say anything, just stared for a long time. That afternoon, he began restoring the abandoned garden behind the house. The small patch of land was barren, grass growing knee-high. Richard wanted to build a swing, just like the one he built with his own father when he was a child. He called Mr. Ben, a neighbor, a retired police officer, to help. Mr. Ben arrived carrying a toolbox. He was a short man with a silver beard and eyes tired from the world. When he heard Richard's story, he simply nodded. I know some people in the city police department. Let me check the file on that Marcus guy. He might be linked to some old cases. Thank you, Richard said. I just want to protect my daughter. Mr. Ben patted his shoulder. A decent father never stands still when his child is afraid. I get it. What's the bravest thing you've ever done for someone you love? Share below. In the following days, Emma gradually got used to Mrs. Helen. Every morning, they picked flowers, drew, and ate apple pie together. Each time Mrs. Helen smiled, Emma smiled faintly, a small gesture. But for Richard, it was the first sign of hope. One afternoon, Emma took bread to the lake to feed the ducks. The lake water was soft as crystal, reflecting the deepening purple sky. She threw crumbs, watching the ducks swim toward her. Suddenly, she froze. On the opposite shore, a man in a black coat stood still. He didn't move, just stared toward her. Emma stepped back, her breathing becoming shallow. Daddy! She screamed. Richard ran out of the yard, his eyes scanning the direction she pointed. But the opposite shore was now empty, only grass whispering softly. Who did you see? Someone. Someone standing there, watching me. Richard squinted. Must have just been a hiker. But a sense of unease settled in his stomach. He looked around. The path leading to the forest had fresh tire tracks. That night, he sat reviewing the security camera footage from the front porch. The screen was black. He frowned, opening the cover to check the wire. It had been cut cleanly, done professionally. Outside, the wind howled fiercely, making the window glass rattle. He turned on his flashlight, walking out to the porch. The rain began to fall sparsely. From the distance, car headlights shone, pointing directly toward the house. Richard stood still, his heart pounding hard. The headlights went out without a sound. He walked a few steps further into the yard, sweeping the flashlight around the fence. No one. He went back inside, locking the door more securely, checking the windows in each room. Emma was asleep, her small face damp with sweat. He tucked her in, then looked out the window one last time. Outside, dense fog covered Pinewood Lake, but in the middle of the fog, he glimpsed movement slow. Blurred, a fleeting shadow of a person walking. He held his breath, gripping the flashlight firmly. The dim light shone in that direction, but only revealed the fog dissolving in patches. He wasn't sure if he'd imagined it. The wind blew harder, making the porch door creak. Richard stood, eyes fixed on the pale white forest. A dry leaf blew by, touching his foot. He bent down to pick it up. It was a small piece of torn paper. The handwritten words were scratched with water. You can't keep her forever. What would you do if you received this note? Comment below. Richard looked at the message, his heart tight. He turned around, pointing the flashlight toward the forest. A blurred figure moved through the fog, slow but distinctly. He walked quickly down the steps, the flashlight beam trembling in his hand. The wind howled through the trees, carrying damp, chilling air. "Hello? Who's there? Show yourself." No response, just the fog rolling. He stood still, his hand clenched around the flashlight, his chest heaving with ragged breaths. In the distance, the lake rippled, reflecting the dim light of the wooden cabin. From inside the room, Emma stirred, calling softly in her sleep. "Daddy!" Richard turned around, running back toward the porch. He stopped at the door, looking back one last time. In the middle of the fog, the figure still seemed to be there, not advancing or retreating. Just watching the house where the father and daughter hid. Early in the morning. Fog was still thick around Pinewood Lake. Sunlight filtered through the trees, but the cold lingered. Richard opened the door and stepped out. Seeing Daniel's old car parked by the gate, Daniel got out, his face serious. His coat still damp from the night fog. "Victoria and Marcus are out on bail," Daniel said without preamble. The court accepted bail, and she just hired attorney Horatio as her lead counsel. "Horatio?" Richard froze. "The same man who ran the investment fund with me in Boston." "Yes, he's now on her side. They have the same goal to take away your custody and ruin your reputation." Richard remained silent for a long time. The image of Horatio flashed in his mind, his former partner who once smiled while shaking his hand, but secretly took away his biggest professional investment. Now that Betrayal had returned, this time in legal form. "She knows how to choose allies," Richard said quietly, his eyes darkening. "Horatio never passes up an opportunity for revenge." Daniel placed a folder on the table. "That's not all. Marcus was also seen in this town a few weeks ago. Mr. Ben just reported it." Richard looked up. "You sure?" Daniel nodded. "Someone recognized him at a gas station west of the forest. He hired a local and amateur photographer who seems to be surveilling your house." Richard looked out the window, seeing Emma sitting with Mrs. Helen in the backyard. The child offered a small smile as Mrs. Helen taught her how to prune lavender. But occasionally, she glanced toward the forest where the tree shadows were already dark. "She looks so scared of the dark," Daniel observed. Richard nodded gently. "Every time it gets dark, she checks the lock 3 times. I know she still hasn't escaped that fear. You have to be careful. Victoria won't stop until she breaks you. How far do you think Victoria will go to get what she wants? Let me know." That afternoon, Mrs. Helen approached, holding a sealed envelope. "Richard, this was in your mailbox this morning. No return address." Richard opened it, and his heart sank. Inside was a stack of photos, Emma feeding ducks by the lake, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. One was zoomed in so close you could see the ribbon in her hair. Mrs. Helen went pale. "Dear God, who would do this?" Richard gripped the photos tightly, a spark of rage igniting in his eyes. "Someone's stalking my daughter." He immediately called Daniel. "He's back. I want to know who it is and why. Don't do anything reckless." "Let me come with you," Daniel said. "Tonight we'll set a trap." That night, Mr. Ben brought old equipment from his police days, an infrared camera, motion sensors, and small alarms. The 3 of them installed them around the backyard fence and the path leading to the forest. "Think of this as a reverse hunt," Mr. Ben smiled faintly. "But the prey is someone messing with children." Night fell quickly. Wind from the lake brought dampness and the smell of mud. Richard sat in the living room, the yellow lamplight casting over his tense face. Emma was asleep. Mrs. Helen sat beside him, softly reading a prayer. Late at night, the chirping of insects was constant. Then click, click, click. The sensor alarm sounded softly. Richard jumped up, grabbing his flashlight. Daniel and Mr. Ben rushed out right behind him. The 3 dashed through the yard, their lights sweeping the forest. Wet branches from the rain brushed against their coats. The fog was so thick their breath misted the air. A flash of light reflected ahead. Richard stopped, his heart pounding hard. Under a tree, a figure knelt. Holding a camera, the lens pointed toward the wooden cabin. Richard moved forward, his voice low. "Who gave you permission to photograph my daughter?" The person startled, trying to run. But Mr. Ben blocked the path. Daniel pointed his flashlight directly at the man's face. The light revealed. He was young, wearing a black coat with a press pass around his neck. "I was just doing my job," he stammered. "What job?" Richard roared. "Taking photos? Gathering evidence. Horatio hired me." "Horatio?" Daniel stepped closer. "What about Victoria?" The man bowed his head, avoiding his gaze. "I don't know much. I just heard them say they wanted to spread the word that Richard was mentally unstable, that he fabricated the abuse story to get assets. They told me to watch and take photos to prove it." Richard stood still. Light rain began to fall. He felt a fire ignite inside him, not just anger, but the shame of being completely slandered. "Do you know what this child has been through? What punishment do you think this photographer deserves? Tell me in the comments." Richard clenched his fist, but Mr. Ben gently pulled him back. "That's enough. Let me handle this." He turned to the reporter. "You're going to give us all your camera data. Then you leave here before I call the police. Understood?" "Understood, understood." The man nodded nervously, handed the memory card to Daniel, then scurried off into the forest, his shadow mixing with the fog. Mr. Ben sighed. "We should check it right now." They returned to the house. Daniel connected the memory card to his laptop. The screen lit up dozens of photos of Emma taken from various angles. Some even showed Richard fixing the swing or standing guard outside the house, and there were audio files. Horatio's voice clearly audible. "Just make the public believe he's delusional. When it gets to court, everything will be easier." The air in the room was heavy. Richard sat, running a hand over his face. "They don't just want the money. They want my reputation and my daughter's future." Daniel nodded gently. "We have the evidence, but we need to plan the next move." Mr. Ben lit a cigarette, looking out the window. "If Marcus is still nearby, he's not just sending watchers. He might try something worse." Richard clenched his fists. "I won't let that happen." The next morning brought rare sunshine. Richard sat at his desk, organizing all the evidence with Daniel photos, recordings, memory cards, bank statements. He began calling old legal contacts, looking for an independent lawyer. Emma woke up, approached, holding a freshly made drawing. "Look, Daddy." The drawing showed a bare tree, but a small green sprout was growing from the base. On a branch, two small birds looked toward the sun. "The tree is growing back after the storm." Her voice was tiny. Richard looked at the drawing for a long time, then offered a faint smile. "You're teaching me, you know?" Emma looked up, puzzled. "Teaching you what?" "Teaching me how to believe that everything can start over." The child offered a weak smile, then ran outside to the garden with Mrs. Helen. The phone on the desk vibrated. Richard looked at the screen. Victoria. His throat felt dry. Daniel looked at him, signaling him to stay calm. Richard hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. "What do you want?" Silence on the other end for a moment, then Victoria's voice came cold and sharp as a knife blade. "Did you think you could hide forever, Richard? I just sent the subpoena. This time you and the child won't have a way out." The call ended. The screen went dark. Richard set down the phone, his eyes hardening. Outside, the wind from Pinewood Lake rose, scattering the lavender branches in the garden. He stood up and walked to the door, looking toward the deep forest where the silent war had just officially begun. One morning in early May, the central courthouse buzzed with noise. Reporters crowded outside the doors, camera flashes exploding endlessly. Today, news headlines screamed, "Millionaire Richard Morgan, abusive father or man seeking justice." Richard stepped out of the car in a gray suit, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights. Emma gripped his hand, her small body lost in the sea of people. Mrs. Helen followed, holding an umbrella, her eyes worried. Daniel wore sunglasses, keeping his distance, watching the reporters and filming, capturing every scrutinizing face. On the other side, Victoria emerged from her car in an impeccable white coat, her face expertly made up. She smiled with disdain when she saw Richard. Beside her, Horatio adjusted his tie with a triumphant smile. "We just have to make the public believe he's crazy," he murmured. Loud enough for Victoria to hear, the courtroom was large, with long wooden benches and cold, bright lights. When the judge entered, the noise calmed. The gavel struck a dry, sharp sound. The trial regarding the custody dispute between Mr. Richard Morgan and Mrs. Victoria Morgan is officially underway. Victoria sat upright, her face innocent, her eyes glistening. She tilted her head toward the judge as if she were the victim. Horatio stood, his voice smooth. "Your Honor, my client is a woman who has been slandered and publicly humiliated in the media. She loves her stepdaughter as if she were her own. Today, we will demonstrate that these abuse allegations are fabricated." Across from him, Richard's attorney opened his file. "We have clear evidence that the child was abused and that this father rescued his daughter from both physical and psychological harm." Richard sat in silence, his eyes only on Emma. The child sat in the auxiliary witness seat, hands clasped together, her small shoulders trembling slightly. Mrs. Helen gently touched her shoulder, whispering, "You're not alone." "What do you think will happen in this courtroom? Drop your prediction below." Horatio called the first witness, a young employee Victoria hired after the incident. The woman approached timidly, claiming Emma often screamed in the middle of the night, threw things, and injured herself. "Do you have evidence?" Richard's attorney asked. "No, but I heard it," she responded, quickly glancing toward Horatio. The second was a psychologist, a gray-haired man with glasses who testified that Emma had a tendency toward hallucinations, imagining scenes of abuse. Behind them, Daniel leaned in, whispering to Richard, "That's Horatio's friend. I saw him at his old club." When Richard's attorney cross-examined, asking about actual medical records, the psychologist stammered, "I only relied on the mother's account." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Victoria remained still, only placing a hand lightly over her chest as if heartbroken. It was Emma's turn to speak. She stood up, her large eyes looking around, her lips pressed tight. The entire courtroom held its breath. "Emma," the judge said gently, "do you wish to say something about this matter?" The child bowed her head, her voice small as a breath. "I want to be with Daddy." The trembling but deeply true statement made the packed courtroom fall into absolute silence. Victoria closed her eyes, then burst into uncontrollable sobs. "I love her too. I would never hurt her." Richard closed his eyes, tears threatening to fall. But he held them back. "Have you ever had to defend yourself against false accusations? Tell me your story." During the lunch recess, Emma sat alone in the hallway. Sunlight filtered through the window glass onto the tile floor, reflecting on her face. Mrs. Helen approached, holding a small apple pie. "Eat this, dear. Then tell me how you feel today." Emma didn't respond, just cried. "Just tell the truth. You don't have to be afraid of anyone." In a distant corner, Richard leaned against the wall, hearing Horatio's laughter as he passed. "You're going to lose everything, Richard. The company and that child." Daniel approached, whispering, "Let me handle this." He followed Horatio to the parking lot. Through the crack in the window, he saw Horatio meeting with a man, the same witness employee from before, and handing him a thick envelope. Daniel silently turned on his camera, recording the entire exchange. That afternoon, the trial resumed. Horatio gave a fluent speech about a mother's love and an obsessive father's psychological instability. Victoria occasionally shed tears, gripping Horatio's sleeve like a tragic victim. When it was Richard's attorney's turn to present his case, he stood up, connecting a USB drive to the projector. The large screen lit up in the courtroom. It was the audio recording from that rainy night. Emma's voice resonated in sobs. "Please stop. I can't take it anymore." The sound of objects breaking, the rain, Richard's frantic screams searching for his daughter, all of it echoed. The air seemed to freeze. A reporter in the back row covered her mouth. The judge signaled to turn off the sound, but his face had TENSED. Double quotes Mrs. Morgan. "How do you explain this segment?" Victoria trembled slightly, forcing a smile. Someone must have edited it. I don't remember this event. And what about the bruises on little Emma's wrist? The attorney pressed. She caused them herself. I saw her hit the wall once. A wave of protest spread through the audience. Daniel stood up, holding his phone. Your Honor, we have video footage proving the defense witness accepted payment from Mr. Horatio. This is video recorded in the parking lot this afternoon. Horatio's face went white. Slander. It's fabricated. Daniel smiled faintly. Would you like me to invite digital forensics to verify the video's timeline? Victoria gripped the armrests tightly. Richard looked toward his daughter, seeing her tremble. But her eyes slowly lighting up. Do you believe justice will prevail? Let me know in the comments. Richard's attorney presented more evidence, photos of the injuries. Emma's personal diary, pages scribbled but with clear words. Today my stepmother made me in the room. I was scared, but Daddy doesn't know. I just want Daddy to come home. The scratching of reporters' notes filled the air. Victoria froze. Horatio clenched his fists, sweat beading on his forehead. At the end of the session, the judge struck the gavel, his voice solemn. The court will retire to deliberate. The next hearing will take place in 2 days. Chairs scraped back. Horatio turned to Victoria, his voice tense. If I fall, you're going down too. Understand? Victoria remained silent, her eyes showing panic. She knew he wasn't making empty threats. That night, in a closed hotel room, Horatio slammed his hand hard on the table, spilling a glass of water. You idiot! You ruined everything! Victoria responded weakly. I didn't expect he'd have video. I thought, shut up. Horatio pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then threw it on the table. Look at this. The screen showed an old video, blurry and shaky, filmed inside the Morgan house. A scene of Victoria grabbing Emma's hair, screaming, then delivering a hard slap. Emma's screams sounded small but chillingly clear. Victoria froze, her hand trembling as she covered her mouth. When did you film this? Insurance, Horatio said coldly. You think I'd work with you without protection? He pulled out a stack of papers from his briefcase and slammed them on the table. Sign. Transfer the authorized assets to me. In exchange, I'll help keep you out of the press. Otherwise, I release this video. Believe me, it'll be on the morning news. Victoria looked at the papers, the words cold as steel. Her hand shook violently. You're blackmailing me. Horatio shrugged. Call it what you want. You choose sign or be devoured. She stared at him for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she picked up the pen. When the ink marked the last page, Horatio offered a faint smile. Good girl. Now both you and Marcus are useless to me. The statement was like a final stab. Victoria looked up, her voice choked. You're as dirty as I am. The difference, Horatio responded, his voice flat as a paper cutter, is that I know what I'm doing. What would you do if you were betrayed like this? Share below. At the same time, in the city police chief's office, Daniel presented a thick file and a hard drive containing video and audio recordings. He spoke slowly, each word clear. This is proof that Horatio Collins, Victoria Morgan's attorney, bribed witnesses and fabricated testimony. The police chief looked at the file, then turned to his subordinate. Issue an arrest warrant immediately. The news spread like wildfire. When police raided the apartment, Horatio was pouring more wine. The door burst open, flashlights pointing directly at his face. Horatio Collins, you're under arrest for bribery and fabrication of evidence. He had no time to react. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Victoria stood frozen, watching him being handcuffed, murmuring to herself, No, this can't be. The next morning, news dominated every TV channel. Big headlines read, Prominent attorney Horatio Collins arrested, scandal in Morgan case. The media exploded. The image of Horatio being escorted through the crowd of reporters became a symbol of false power's collapse. At Victoria's mansion, she threw the remote control at the wall, the sound of breaking glass echoing loudly. Her breathing was ragged, her hair disheveled, her face pale. He betrayed me. He betrayed me. Marcus, her accomplice brother, was hiding behind the door, his eyes terrified. Sister, what are we going to do now? Victoria looked at him, laughing in a twisted way. What are we going to do? You should ask what they're going to do to us. That night, Marcus disappeared but didn't get far. Police arrested him at a border checkpoint. Under neon lights, he confessed almost immediately, his voice trembling. Victoria told me to do everything. I just listened. I didn't want to hurt the child. Police took notes, each word like a nail being hammered in. The next morning, the city newspaper printed a new headline. The perfect wife is an abusive manipulator. Victoria's photo was on the front page, a beautiful face, empty eyes, beneath which were lines describing her charges. The entire city was in an uproar. People talked in cafes, on buses, on corners. I thought she was sweet, but she was so cruel. Were you shocked by this twist? Rate this story from 1 to 10 in the comments. In the small house by Pinewood Lake, Richard held the newspaper in his hand. He wasn't euphoric or gloating. Just sighed. Emma sat beside him, looking at her father. Are you sad? Richard smiled weakly, stroking her head. No, just tired, sweetheart. Mrs. Helen entered, holding a cluster of pale lavender. This flower is a symbol of healing, she said, placing it on the table. Emma looked at it, then took a small sprig and tucked it into her drawing notebook. Daniel arrived shortly after, a rare look of relief on his face. We've practically won. The court will sentence this week. Richard nodded, but his voice was slow. I just want Emma to have peace, to no longer be afraid. Outside, the child was floating paper boats on the lake. The small boats drifted away, the water reflecting the first light of the new morning. Mrs. Helen stood beside Richard, her voice low. You know, I once had a daughter. She passed away due to domestic violence. When I look at Emma, I see her reflection. Richard turned around, his eyes moistening. I'm sorry. She shook her head. It's not necessary. It's just that if Emma smiles. Again, I feel like my daughter is also finding some peace wherever she is. They stood in silence for a long time. Only the gentle wind and the scent of lavender remained in the air. Have you ever lost someone and found healing through helping others? Tell me. That night, Richard entered his office and pinned Emma's drawing. The tree growing back after the storm on the wall. The desk lamp shone, making the small patch of green stand out in the dim room. He looked at it for a long time, then whispered, We overcame the storm, didn't we, sweetheart? When he turned off the light and left, the window was slightly open. Wind entered, blowing the newspaper from the table to the floor. On the page, the bold headline was clearly visible. Final hearing tomorrow. Outside on the porch, night quietly enveloped the town. Emma woke with a start, went outside and adjusted her sweater. She looked into the distance through the fog. At the end of the path, car headlights flickered in the night. A convoy of vehicles was slowly heading toward the city, a penitentiary transport van. Emma stood still, her small hand gripping the railing. She didn't know who was inside, just felt her heart beating hard. As if the past was truly leaving. In the distance, Pinewood Lake reflected the trail of car lights, stretching like a silver thread in the darkness. The wind whispered softly. The lavender on the porch releasing a soothing fragrance, signaling that a dawn was approaching, but also the beginning of the final judgment day. That morning, the sky was covered with a thin layer of fog. Crowds gathered outside the central courthouse. Everyone wanted to witness the final verdict in the Morgan case. Camera flashes exploded like a storm, the buzz of conversation rippling against the cold stone steps. Richard stepped out of the car, Emma beside him in a simple white dress. In her hand was her old teddy bear, the only item left from the old house. Daniel followed closely, carrying a thick file. Mrs. Helen walked slowly, holding Emma's hand, her eyes kind but firm. In the courtroom, cold lights shone over the wooden benches. Everyone stood when the judge entered. Victoria was led through a back door, her hands lightly cuffed, no makeup, her face pale. She looked up, meeting Richard's eyes, and for the first time, there were no pretenses, only an exhausted, disoriented woman. The gavel struck. The verdict hearing in the Morgan case is now in session. The prosecutor began with the video Horatio had recorded. The large screen showed the image of Victoria in a fit of rage, grabbing Emma's hair. The child's screams resonated throughout the courtroom. Many people covered their mouths. Some reporters lowered their cameras, not wanting to take another photo. At the same time, Marcus's statement was read aloud to the court. "I only did what my sister told me. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just thought if we had money she'd calm down." Victoria closed her eyes tightly. 2 tears fell onto the table. When asked to speak, she stood up, her voice hoarse. "I used to think controlling others would make me strong. But in reality, I was just afraid of being abandoned. Afraid of poverty. Afraid of losing everything. And when I was afraid, I became a monster that even I despise." The courtroom was silent. Light from the window filtered in, illuminating her pale face. Emma sat beside her father, eyes wide open. She wasn't timid or angry. Richard just watched as Victoria bowed her head. Emma whispered softly, "I forgive her." Richard turned, astonished. "What did you say?" "I forgive her. She already lost everything, Daddy." "No one. How do you feel about Emma's forgiveness? Is it too soon or is it powerful? Let me know." No one in the courtroom spoke. Even the judge stopped his pen for a moment. A minute of silence spread. Then the judge spoke, his voice deep and clear. "The court has reviewed the testimony and all evidence. Mrs. Victoria Morgan is found guilty of abuse, fraud, and incitement to conspiracy. The sentence: 12 years in prison, permanent revocation of custody and inheritance rights." The gavel struck a dry, final sound. Victoria didn't react, just looked directly at Emma one last time. But in her eyes, there were no more machinations, only weakness, almost pleading. As the officers led her away, she turned around, speaking softly, almost inaudibly. "I'm sorry, Emma." Emma watched her leave, her eyes damp but her lips curved slightly, not a smile. But acceptance. Richard hugged his daughter, feeling a heaviness in his chest. It was over, but there was no victory here, only the remnants of pain. After the hearing, reporters clustered outside the courthouse, camera flashes like a storm. Daniel protected the father and daughter as they reached the car. When the car door closed, the outside noise faded, leaving only their breathing and heartbeats. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked. Richard nodded. "I think finally, justice has a human face." Daniel offered a faint smile, pulling out a cigarette from his box. He leaned against the third-floor railing of the courthouse, looking down at the crowded street. "At least this time we saved someone," he murmured. The cigarette flame flickered on his face, evoking the image of his late wife, also a victim of family conflict. He sighed, letting the wind carry away the smoke. Late that afternoon, in the small house by the lake, sunset gilded the wooden wall. Emma sat by the window, watching Mrs. Helen tend to a small pot of lavender. "You plant it," she said. "This flower blooms in summer, but for that to happen you have to care for it every day. Like me, right?" Emma smiled faintly, digging in the soil with her hand. "Yes, every wound needs time to bloom." Richard stood nearby, silently watching the 2 women, one old, one young, like 2 pieces of the piece he once lost. What does healing mean to you? Share your thoughts below. That evening, he hung Emma's picture, the tree growing back after the storm, on the wall right beside the window overlooking the lake. Moonlight filtered in, reflecting on the water's surface. He whispered, "Your mother. She would have wanted to see this scene too." Emma approached, resting her head on her father's shoulder. "I'm not afraid anymore, Daddy." Richard gently squeezed her hand. "I know. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." Outside, the fog gradually dispersed. The sun rose on the horizon, the first light of dawn shining brightly on Pinewood Lake like an endless golden ribbon dot in the car window. Water droplets remained, reflecting the light, sparkling like unshed tears. Emma opened the window, and wind entered, blowing an old drawing sheet. The paper flew low outside, spinning in the air, then gently fell onto the lake's surface. On the paper, the clumsy handwriting of an 8-year-old child was clear in sunlight. "Daddy and me. Where there is light." Richard stood by the door, watching the paper drift away. The light reflected on his face, making his wrinkles seem to fade. Somewhere, the past seemed to be falling with that paper, leaving only the dawn and a new beginning for two souls who had just been saved. 1 year later. Morning fog over Pinewood Lake was thick and clear as spring's breath. In the middle of green grass, the beige house called Safe Haven looked peaceful. Surrounded by the purple lavender garden Emma and Mrs. Helen had planted with their own small hands, the wooden door opened every morning, welcoming children from other shelters to play and learn, carrying excited laughter like young birds finding their nest. Richard was no longer the busy executive, no more late-night calls or complicated stock charts. He was the center's director, the man who made hot chocolate every morning, who told fairy tales every night. His desk no longer contained contracts or figures-only notebooks, scribbled with the children's small dreams. Build another garden area in the back, make a small fish pond by the patio. Buy more watercolors for art class. Daniel stayed close, managing the center's security. Every morning, he taught the children martial arts, how to stand tall and how not to bow their heads to fear. When the children went out to the yard, their laughter mixed with the wind, and for the first time in years, he really smiled, a smile that no longer hid old pain. Mrs. Helen managed the therapy garden. The beds of pale purple lavender bloomed, releasing a soothing fragrance. In the small corner where she often sat, 2 framed photos rested side by side, her lost daughter and Emma, the child who made her believe love could pass from one person to another, even through scars. Emma was 9 years old now, her hair long, her face bright. She helped teach art to the newly arrived kids who once feared the dark, once silent like her. Each time they held a paintbrush nervously, Emma sat and smiled. "It's okay. Just draw what you see in your heart." On her desk, her old teddy bear was still there, but now sewn with purple thread. "A sign of resurrection. What's something you've healed from that you're proud of? Share below." Every morning, Richard made hot chocolate, placing 2 cups on the old wooden table. Then he walked with his daughter along the lakeshore. They floated small paper boats, each carrying a piece of paper with the words, "Let go of old things." Emma watched the boats drift away in the morning sun, shining on the water like a memory that had been cleansed. One afternoon, the mailman delivered an envelope with a prison postmark. It was a letter from Victoria. She wrote with trembling handwriting, saying she'd begun learning to paint, and her first paintings were of Pinewood Lake and the light from the window. At the end of the letter, she asked for her apology to be conveyed to Emma. Emma read the letter for a long time without saying anything. Finally, she folded it, went out to the garden, and placed the paper under a blooming lavender bush. "I'm not angry anymore," she whispered. "I just hope she finds peace too." That spring, the Safe Haven garden was vibrant purple. The scent of lavender spread throughout the yard, mixing with the children's laughter and the sound of lake wind. Reporters visited, writing that this was a place where pain becomes light. When asked, Richard simply smiled. "We don't heal anyone. We just plant seeds and let them grow from there." That night, Emma held her first painting session. The picture she chose to hang was a scene of 2 people walking under rain in the distance. A house glowed, yellow light coming from the window like a promise. There's always a place to come home to. When the session ended, Richard lifted his daughter, pressing his forehead against her soft hair. "You're truly safe now, aren't you?" Emma nodded, smiling. In the lingering twilight, the imaginary camera slowly pulled back. The beige house appeared in the middle of the purple lavender field. Reflecting in the shimmering gold of Pinewood Lake, small paper boats floated gently on the water, each carrying a wish for children who were once forgotten. Richard stood in the flower garden, hands in his pockets, watching Emma laugh among the children. Behind them, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that no longer felt threatening, just peaceful. "We made it," he whispered to himself. We really made it. And as the last light of day kissed the horizon, a new chapter began, not one written in courtrooms or legal briefs, but in the laughter of children who finally learned what it meant to be safe, to be loved, and to be home. Thank you for following Emma and Richard's journey. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts below. What lesson will you carry with you from this story?